This problem involves working with an ArrayIntList and throwing exceptions. We're asked to write a new method for the ArrayIntList class called subList that takes a from index that's inclusive and a to index that's exclusive, and that returns a new list composed of the values in that range. So, for example, when we have this list that has 6 different values in it, if we're asked to give the values from 0 through 3, this is the index 0, 1, 2, 3. This is the value at index 3. But because the to index is an exclusive index, that means include values up to but not including that 24. That's why we get the values 3, 8, and 19. When we're asked to do indexes 1 through 2 but not including 2, we end up getting just that value 8. When we're asked to go 4 through 6, so this is starting at the value at index 4 and going to index 6. Well, this is what's at index 4, this is what's at index 5. Index 6 is actually the size of this list. It's one beyond the highest index of a value that's actually in this list. But that's that convention, the exclusive to index. So saying 4 through 6 is a way of saying start at 4 and go all the way to the end of this list. It does include the 9, but that exclusive size then is the way we specify all the way through the end. When we give indexes that are equal, 5 and 5, because the second one is exclusive, we're not supposed to include what's at this index. And so 5 through 5 is actually a way of specifying an empty list. You might think that would be an error case, but the convention in Java is to say that's just an empty sublist. That would be the idea. But here are 3 examples of illegal calls. We shouldn't have a from index that's bigger than the to index. They can be equal, but this first one can't be bigger. We also can go up to a to index of 6. That's the size of this list. So we can go that far, but we can't specify something that's even bigger. A 7 would be even beyond that. And the convention in Java is that that becomes an error. And similarly, if a from index is a negative number, that would be an error. So I've set up a JGrasp file that sets up that list of 6 values and tests each of these different cases. And in the testing code, it reports the from and the to index. Then it makes a call on the sublist method that we're going to write. It captures the result in a variable called result and shows us what it's equal to. So I have the ArrayIntList class here for us to work with, and I've gone ahead and set up the header and the pre-post comments for this particular method. And it's supposed to be returning a brand new list. Sublist is supposed to make a brand new ArrayIntList. So what I'm going to do is begin by saying that I want an ArrayIntList that I could call result. It's a new ArrayIntList, initially empty, but we'll fill it up in a second. So we know we're going to want to construct a brand new list and that we're going to want to return it. So that's the problem involves making a new list, it involves returning that list, and in between we want to fill it up. So we'll want to have some kind of a for loop here with an int I that starts somewhere, I less than something, I plus plus. And inside of here, what we'd want to do is to take element data sub I. So that's the next thing in our list. If we've been asked to make a sublist of our list, we have this I loop. We haven't picked the bounds yet, but I is going to vary from something to something. And so given the element data I, that's the next thing from our list. And what do we want to do with it? We want to put it into the result list. So we can just say to the result list, we want you to add that value to your list. We want to add that at the end of your list to fill it up. That's what we want to do as we go through this loop. And so then we just have to pick bounds here. Well, the bounds are actually given by the parameters here. That we want to start at an I of the from index. That's the starting value. And it's an inclusive index. And we want to go while I is strictly less than the to index. And that's an exclusive index, and that's why we go while I is strictly less than that. So there wasn't a whole lot of code to write here to give a basic solution to this. Let's compile it, make sure it works. Compile our client code and make sure that works. And then we can go ahead and run it and see whether it works. So when we run it, we do get an exception eventually. Let's take a look and see what we have here. So the first result is the list 3, 8, 19. And if we look over here, 3, 8, 19, that's good. Our second answer is the list 8, which matches the answer over here. Our third answer was 17, 9, and that matches the answer over here. And if we scroll down a bit and take a look, our next answer was an empty list, and that was the answer over here. And then everything else is supposed to throw an exception. All of the other cases are supposed to throw an exception. And if we take a look, that's not what our code is doing. And if we scroll down a little further, we'll see we were getting an array index out of bounds exception. So even this exception isn't what we want, because we were told to throw an illegal argument exception. So we have to fix up this code so that it does the exception handling that we've been asked to do. So what we want to do over here in our ArrayIntList class is to add some extra code here. And this exception handling code, if it can be put at the beginning of the method, it should be. That we basically want to say if there's some kind of an error, then what we wanted to do here is to throw an exception. That's the idea. Is if some error is detected at the very beginning, throw the exception. So what would be an error? Well, this has to be true. This precondition has to be satisfied. And there's actually 3 parts to this precondition. We want to be sure that the 0 is less than or equal to the from index. We want to make sure that the from index is less than or equal to the to index. And we want to make sure that the to index is less than or equal to size. We want all 3 of those things to be true. So it's a logical and. We want something and something and something. But that's what we want to have be true in order to make it legal. We're trying to specify what would make it illegal. So we want the negation of that. And from De Morgan's law, we know that when you negate a sequence of ands, it turns into a sequence of ors. And so we want to say if the first one is a problem, or the second condition is a problem, or the third condition is a problem, then we would produce this error. We would throw the exception. So what about the first case? The first case would be that the from index was a negative number. So if the from index is less than 0, that would be a bad value, and we'd want to throw an exception. Or if in that second case we'd want to be sure that the from index is less than or equal to the to index, the negation of that is that the from index is bigger than the to index. Or that third case, we wanted to say that the to index is less than or equal to the size. So if the to index was greater than the size, that would be the negation of it being less than or equal to the size. So in any of those cases, we want to throw a new illegal argument exception. We need to construct an exception that we're throwing here. So that would be the extra code that we would throw in here to deal with our exception cases. If I go back over to the ArrayIntList client code then, let's go ahead and run it again. And it was getting the same results that it had before. And then when we get to this call where it's using the from index of 5 and the to index of 4, it's throwing an illegal argument exception. And that's just what it's supposed to do. So that's good. We're getting what we wanted there. We're not seeing the other cases because when it threw that illegal argument exception, that was this call right here that was producing the illegal argument exception. So it never got to the other 2 calls. Well, so let's go ahead and comment this out and recompile it and make sure that we get the illegal argument exception here as well. So we can go ahead and run this version of it, and it ends up throwing, take a peek, it's throwing the illegal argument exception. We can come back over here and we'll see which case was it. It was the 3 through 7 case. So that's exactly what we wanted to have happen here, is that in that 3 through 7 case, we're getting the exception being thrown there. And so we can go ahead and comment that out, recompile again, and see whether we're getting an exception in the -2, 3 case. So we can go ahead and run this again. And now we're getting an exception for the -2, 3 case, and it's the illegal argument exception that we were asked to throw. So that's exactly what we want to have happen in each of those 3 error cases, which means this is a solution to the problem that we were asked to solve. It constructs that ArrayIntList we were asked to construct, and it throws exceptions when preconditions are violated. Now, one last little thing we should throw in here is if you're going to be throwing exceptions like this, then you should go ahead and say throws illegal argument exception if not. That we want to say that if this precondition is violated, we want to make it clear to any client of our code that we're going to throw an illegal argument exception in that particular case. So that completes our solution to this problem.